Let's take a look at some information and charts on Decred for Brave New Coin. So Decred is a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake network. They've got a DEX, they've got privacy, coin shuffle on chain. So let's take a look at all of those data points collectively because they have some pretty good metrics and everybody else needs to take note. If you're a proof of work chain, I want to see hash rate and difficulty. If you're a proof of stake coin, I want to see total percentage of the network being staked. I want to see inflation. If you've got a DEX on chain, show me the metrics, show me the volume, show me the traders, show me what's going on. This is the fastest way to get your coin into mainstream conversations. People need to know how to evaluate this stuff, so they're going to compare everything collectively. They're going to look at transaction data. They're going to look at all of the on-chain data. A lot of people looking at this stuff don't even pay attention to technicals at all, so we're going to need as transparent of a metric system as possible. So if we look at DCR, they break down the block reward between miners in proof of work, proof of stake, as well as the dev subsidy. 61.7% has been mined so far. They even are up front and say, you know what, we have a dev pre-mine. They call it a pre-mine. Good for them. I know there's a lot of Bitcoiners on the DCR bandwagon, so there's a lot of community overlap here between the two. And 10% of the total block reward goes to devs versus whatever it is for Zcash, 20, 30%, I don't know. It's 10% seems correct to me. Let the market decide, but in my opinion, 10% seems okay. For proof of stake, they use a ticketing system. The tickets have supply demand to them, so the price adjusts accordingly. And really, that's all I have to say about it. I don't know, we can look at metrics on the ticketing system, but that seems such a fickle thing to look at because you can just unlock or lock it up. Like it's like locking in DeFi, right? Like it's not like a certificate of deposit. There's not some vesting here. It's fluid as far as I understand it, as far as I'm concerned. Looking at the hash rate distribution, now if this was pure proof of work, this would be a problem because we're seeing miner centralization between three pools. Essentially, with this new China news, how much of this is in China, I don't know. Based on the hash rate has declined slightly since a few weeks ago. Maybe that China news is playing a part here. I don't know. Difficulty down as well. But overall, still staying within the previous ranges, essentially. If we look at the ASICs on the Blake 256 R14 algorithm that's used for Decred, there haven't been any new ASICs since 2019, and all of them are still in profit with prices, Decred prices where they're at based on the block reward. So again, this is more of a concern if it's pure proof of work, but it's important to just look at this stuff. How many ASICs are there? Are there any new coming? What is the hash rate? What is the profitability? Do people care about mining Decred? That sort of thing. Total nodes on the network at 278 according to DCR stats, most of which are in the United States and Europe. Very few nodes in China, so maybe the network is kind of immune to Chinese mining slightly at this point, but there's very clearly miners in China. So that's an important footnote to pay attention to across the next few weeks, definitely. And if we look into the on-chain stats, this checkonchain.com website, tons of metrics for more than just DCR. First time I'm coming across it. I don't know how new it is, but bravo on whoever put that together. I think it's Checkmatey, I think is his name on Twitter. Long DCR bull and analyst, so good for them for putting all this together. It looks like 60% of the total supply is staked. So you can see as the staking percentages increase, ticket prices increase. Now, any of this stuff individually isn't going to necessarily tell you, go long here, go short here. It's just more of a health check of the ecosystem. They also have a governance component, which I haven't even mentioned yet, and a decentralized voting system. So they've really incorporated as much stuff as they can, and good for them. All coins should do this. Try to outcompete everybody, trying to do everything as long as you do it well. This is the treasury flows. This is inflows. They still have 677,000 Decred, so the treasury system is healthy as far as deploying capital for whatever the proposals may be. All that looks fine. If we look at inflation for Decred, it's currently around 6% versus BTC at 1.4%. Looking at total supply, again, around 13 million coins for Decred versus 19 million, 18.7 for BTC. And the inflation rate for Decred will continue to decline and just had its, looks like some sort of recent decline. although that could be just mining. That's probably just mining. Mining related as a hash rate came off. So again, still better than Zcash at 12%. So a better long-term hold in that respect. If you look at the privacy coin shuffle stuff, it looks like the 30-day privacy volume is around 250,000 transactions. So it's still early, but it's up and to the right. I mean, people are using it to a point, it looks like. It's important to me that if you're implementing stuff for your chain, people care about it. Really, that's step one. Step two is having increasing amounts of people care about it. So this looks right where it should based on, it's started in October 2019. So it's had a little bit of time to catch on. If we look at total transaction counts, now this is going to be colored by the DCR DEX stuff, I believe. And total transaction counts are up and to the right, rising to all-time highs. That's what you want to see post 2017. So it's no surprise that the cred price is where it's at relative to these metrics. If all these metrics are up and to the right, price isn't going to just sit there and stagnate most of the time. Fees are up slightly, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to every other chain, 10 cents a transaction, 5 cents a transaction, that's nothing compared to what you're getting on ETH, for example, as far as fees. NVT is at basically all-time lows, active addresses all-time highs. Again, it's hard to be bearish on that. NVT's inverse metric of economic utility versus market cap. And one thing, again, caveat here is the cred DEX plays a role. If it's on chain, then it's going to affect all these stats. Even still, with the DEX implementation with the coin shuffle stuff, it's still rising active addresses since January 2020. So if the new normal is what we have now, there's definitely been an increased use in the chain, whether it be coin shuffle stuff, whether it be the DEX. People are definitely using it. Here's another way to visualize NVT on this oscillator down here, sitting at all-time lows. So NVT would tell you that this is a really good buy for Decred, even though the technicals in a second I'm going to show you look not so great, but they don't look great for pretty much everything across the board right now. Here's hodl waves for Decred. So we can measure when coins are moved or last moved, and then we can map that out as a percentage of the active supply, the total supply, moving in 24 hours, 1 day, 3 months, 5 years, that sort of thing. For BTC, the most important slice has really been this 3 to 6 month or less slice. And typically when there's, on BTC, when there's over 50% of the chain has moved in the past 3 to 6 months, that has represented a local top or all-time high in price. So it looks like that's standing up decently well for Decred currently as well, with a peak in the orange and yellow zone, this 3 to 6 month, 1 to 3 month, 1 week to 1 month. So there's a lot of on-chain activity here since 2017, and that also represents proof of stake in here as well. So it's not as clean of a read as BTC if you're just looking at this and comparing the two. Because if you look at, even in 2017, there were a lot of on-chain movements, a lot of on-chain activity. At any given point in time, there's 10% of the chain is moving every day. So it's hard to really take this seriously compared to BTC because it's not proof of stake. So I just think there's a lot more churn here. Plus there's the coin shuffle stuff. Plus there's the DEX. So it's going to look different. Here's the Puel multiple, which is basically how rich are the miners today versus the past 365 days. The Puel multiple, unlike BTC, for Decred, it did get into this mega overbought territory on the oscillator. So the buy zone is still quite a ways down here on the multiple, and you can see where that sits on the yearly average. So it got pretty extended out of the yearly average. And when miners get rich, or anybody, right, when you have a windfall of profit, you get more and more compelled to sell, typically. Unless you're a maximalist of any coin you mine, you have to look for ROI, you have to look for paying for electricity, right, overhead, that sort of thing, on top of hopefully turning a profit. So at some point there's a magic number, right? And historically for Decred, it has been a 5 to 6x up to a 10x on those block rewards. So definitely hit that zone. If we look at the total DCR DEX volume for one pair, it's showing continuous increases in volume because this is cumulative volume. This isn't per day. If it's a DEX, I really want to see what is total volume per day since inception. That's for any exchange to the end of time. This cumulative, if I have one critique of this website, this data, I care a lot less about cumulative volume. And to me, what's more important is daily volume for sure for exchanges. Switching to technicals, we have the 365 MA down here and 5 times the 365 MA with a midline in the white here. And again, unlike BTC, unlike LTC, unlike Monero, unlike a lot of these coins, Decred rose so quickly it actually hit that multiplier and told you be careful up here. And sure, it went slightly higher, but not much. And now it's down 70% or whatever, 60, 50, whatever, down from 300 to 130, let's say, okay? That is a massive drop, regardless of what you're looking at. So if you ever need a sanity check, you can always use the moving average multiplier and say, okay, are we oversold based on the yearly average, or are we way overbought based on the yearly average, right? This is very similar to that Puel multiple or any oscillator. It just is dynamic with the 365 MA. So just like it pulled back previously at the highs here, this was definitely a warning sign in February, in May, that things were overheated for sure. So it pulled back where it really should have pulled back, so it makes sense in that respect. It even got way past the R5 yearly pivot, so mega extension based on the previous year's price action. And really for me, the biggest issue, like Bancor I mentioned today, the volumes up here are much less than anything we've seen on basically another 50% drop or less. So there's most of the volume sits at $50 or less. That's because, we established all-time highs, brief price discovery. So you're going to have some support at the previous all-time high from 2017, 2018. But if this stuff doesn't hold, you're going to see a reversion back to 50, 60 down here based on volume. The Puel multiple will reset. NVT will get even more oversold, but I wouldn't rule out drawdowns that far for stuff like this because it basically 10x plus. I mean, it's still sitting at a 10x from October 2020. So there's still a mega profit based on anyone trading this at the lows. There was an invert head and shoulders down here. There was a 5200 flip, which had previously flipped a couple times and done nothing. So there wasn't a lack of bullish evidence for this move. It definitely outperformed expectations. I think anybody can tell you that. But just where it sits, there's not a lot of support. I like 50. I like 100. Probably bounces around in there. But if you're looking for a bullish continuation, you'd look for prices above the cloud, above 150 plus at this point. And that'll change over time slightly. But that would be your new bull trend, very similar to kind of what happened into November, December 2020. That's not to say we're expecting some sort of crazy continuous uprun, but conditions would be bullish again on the trend metrics. And lastly, on Decred BTC, much more stable support here at 00265. Lots of VPVR support here. It was a previous mega local low in 2017, previous highs in 2016. So there's plenty of reasons that price just chills out between 00265 and 004. So this looks much more neutral than the USD pair does. So overall, Decred's got a lot going for it. It does a lot of stuff. It kind of has its thumb in all the pies. Is that the right expression? I don't want to call it jack of all trades, master of none, but it's got a lot of complexities to it for sure. And lastly, real quick, I'm going to mention the non-custodial portfolio management tools on Enzyme.finance that I trade for Techemy Capital. We have an ETH-BTC fund, and we have a DeFi portfolio. Decred is in neither of these instruments, but if you want to participate, you can deposit Ether USDC, and it holds it into a smart contract, then gives me the ability to trade those funds on either the Ether-BTC side or of various DeFi coins. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.